Hello there, and welcome to our first Just-in-Time Teaching Technology Grant Showcase. I'm Maddie Tolliver from the Center for Teaching Excellence at SMU, and we want to give a brief overview about what the Just-in-Time Teaching Technology Grants are before we showcase 4 of our previous grant winners and basically what they have decided to purchase with the money that they earn from the grant. So this grant is a partnership between the Center for Teaching Excellence at SMU and the Academic Technology team, which is part of the Office of Informational Technology. So every semester we have about $5,000 that we give out to faculty right before classes start. So usually I would say a couple weeks before classes start, we open up the call for applications for this grant, and we close them at the end of the first week of classes so that people have time to process this and get the whatever artifacts that they need right before the semester starts. So we try to make a process that is really easy to do, less bureaucracy as possible. It's just a simple Google form, so we can expedite the process and people can get the materials that they need, and they can try to do innovative things pedagogically that they wouldn't otherwise have without these technology tools or some non-technology items also, right? So usually the max amount that we give out per person is $500 because it is a very limited budget of $5,000. So we try to give and spread out to as many people as possible. If anybody wants to purchase something that is more expensive than $500, then the department has to cover that amount. It cannot be an out-of-pocket expense. So it has to go through kind of the budgeting system and all that. So we try to whenever we are evaluating the proposals, there's a few things that we look for. We look at how many students this grant might benefit, or the purchase of this technology or tool might benefit. We look at potential pedagogical transformation that it could happen. So a lot of times, like that rationale paragraph that the person submits, it gives us better understanding how they're going to be utilizing it. If you can reutilize it for several semesters, that is something that we consider also. We consider the cost, right? So if something is, less expensive to provide and is going to serve a lot of students, that's a given that we probably will provide that. We try to stay away of a couple of things, personal use items. So if somebody just needs like an extra monitor or something, that's not the function of the grant, because it's not going to transform something pedagogically in the classroom or impact the students as much. We try to not repeat the grant. So usually it's for different, you might have the same person receive different awards, but it's for different items. We're not awarding for the same thing. So we're trying to spark innovation. So if it is something that you want to try a semester, we give that money, you try if it works. We encourage faculty to reach out to their departments or their deans to try to get, that funding subsidized so that they can do that every semester. So no personal items, no repeats. And that's pretty much it. So it's very low bureaucracy on the process, but, ideally we want to make sure that we're reaching the more amount of students, and there's going to be some pedagogical transformation. So we have 4 faculty featured today. So we have Aria Cabot from World Languages and Literatures Department, and she got some Google Cardboards. So do you want to go ahead and get started and kind of share a little bit, Aria, of how that grant worked and how you used that?
Sure. Thank you, Maddie. Yeah. I had slides, but I think I prefer to see people's faces. So I might there's a person wearing some goggles, and just talk a little bit about what we've done so far with VR. I guess I should start by introducing myself. So I wear a few different hats in our department. I am the director of our Teaching and Technology Center. So I work with all the faculty on our online curriculum, which was especially helpful in that very rapid switch to remote teaching during COVID. And that was one of the, I think, initial times when I first applied for a just-in-time teaching grant. We did something that had nothing to do with technology because of the fact that we were all on Zoom. We actually did a cooking class virtually with an instructor. So that was really fun. And I also teach Italian courses online, in person and abroad, through our SMU in Tuscany summer program. So as an instructor, I think one of my goals is always to make those three modes converge and blend as much as possible. I try to think about, if ideally we'd all be in Italy, and since we can't get there, how can I bring Italy into the online classroom and the on-campus classroom space, through the use often of technological tools. So I think the idea for the Google Cardboards first came during COVID, when a lot of Italian museums started offering virtual museum visits during the lockdown. And so we did a lot of virtual visits asynchronously. We tried to do some synchronously, and a lot of museums wouldn't let us because of Zoom not being allowed inside the museum space. But it sort of just got the thinking going of how can we continue to make the Zoom space and the actual space of the museum converge. And so we were able to get a classroom set of Google Cardboards. If you've never used them before, this is what they look like. It's just literally a cardboard box that opens up into a very easy to assemble set of goggles, and your cell phone slides right in to the back, the little adhesive pad, and boom, you got a 3D experience for $10 or thereabouts. So with our set of Google Cardboards, we did a few different activities. I guess that's the other thing I would say, is that we try to stretch what we get as far as we can. And so outside of the classroom, we did find a few other ways to use the cardboards as well. So the classroom that was associated with the grant was an Italian 1402 second semester Italian class that has a little unit on Italian museums. And our students were able to visit the Vatican and go into the Sistine Chapel and just explore some of the works that we had been discussing in a 3D environment. Outside of the classroom, we brought those cardboards to an event that we host every fall called Picture Yourself Abroad, where we encourage students to interact in some way with the locations of our SMU Study Abroad programs through a ton of different activities: photo booths, tarot card readings, food, obviously collage making, and then we added one station of VR tours this year where students could try on the cardboards and go to Madrid and Seville and Orvieto and Florence in different locations and just walk around and experience a little bit in 3D. So we did survey our students following their experience with the Google Cardboards, and we just asked them 4 questions. So 75% of students responded yes, that they did enjoy seeing the Sistine Chapel in virtual reality 3D. And 75% said that they would enjoy exploring more locations in virtual reality. 88% said it was really easy to use the cardboards and that it was more interesting and memorable than watching a 2D video. So I would say overall the response was pretty positive. We did solicit some qualitative feedback. Positively, they said, I could see the details of the paintings up close. It was really neat. It was very dramatic. I felt like I got to experience it as if I was really there. And then a few students said that it was interesting, but hurt their eyes, that it was a little bit dizzying. And that's a common reaction or side effect to virtual reality in general. So we did expect to see some students say that that really wasn't a good experience for them. Some challenges aside from the experience of dizziness, I think a lot of our phones no longer fit the original dimensions of the Google Cardboard. So I've got an old iPhone 7. My phone fits perfectly. The larger new iPhones and some Androids didn't fit. So that was a little bit of a challenge. But overall, I think we were really excited. And also it allowed us to sort of think about next steps in the future and what we can possibly do with VR in world languages beyond the cardboards, beyond something, very static like a tour with a cardboard. So I'd be happy to talk about that in a question period if anyone has follow-up questions they want to ask about what we plan to do next.
That's awesome. Thank you, Aria. Anybody has any questions about that project? Oh, if you do, you can send a message through the chat or just raise your hand, or we can just at the end open up for questions again if you need some time to think about it. So next, I'm going to ask Kristie Abt from Applied Physiology and Sports Management, and she had some health and fitness assessments for her class. Hi, Kristie.
Hi. Is it okay to share slides?
Sure, absolutely. That should be
I won't
enabled.
make it
so
super formal.
yeah,
just because mine is a little bit harder to describe, I think. So let me see. Can you guys all see that? Can you see my screen? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll just introduce myself again. I am an assistant clinical professor. This is my first full year being full-time here at SMU, and I do teach in the Applied Physiology and Sport Management department. And to kind of give you an idea of where the funding went for my class, I just want to give you guys a brief background on what the class actually is. And so this is an upper level elective class. So usually I have seniors in this class. They are on the applied physiology side of the department. And these are students who have career aspirations in allied health. So most of them want to go into physical therapy, nurse practitioner, registered nurse, medical doctor, occupational therapist, exercise physiologist. And so those are the students that we work with. And what is important about that is that these students are usually the ones that when they are in their careers, they're on the front line of prevention and treatment of disease. And I should have mentioned, if I didn't, the title of the class is Physiology of Health and Disease. And so my job is to help students not only understand the physiology of how we keep our bodies healthy, but also how do we prevent, or if we have disease, how do we treat that? But I also have to equip them with practical skills to actually go into their positions and do the necessary assessments that are going to be important for that. And my background also is exercise physiology. And so I might be a little bit biased, but I think it would be hard to battle this. But when we're looking at ways to improve our overall health and for sure prevent or treat many diseases, there's probably not a better type of medicine than exercise. And so the theme of this class is really centered around this global initiative from the American College of Sports Medicine that is known as Exercise is Medicine. And so what we're trying to do is get the professions in the allied health, the knowledge and the skills to be able to talk to their patients about the importance of physical activity, but also provide them with the resources to do just that. So that's the entire theme of the class. There are multiple objectives of this class, but the one that pertains mainly to the funding that you guys offered is really related to the ability to administer, evaluate, and then interpret common health and fitness assessments. And so we spent a lot of time going over different types of assessments, how to go ahead and do them. So again, that they have these practical skills to go out and do it. The way that I evaluate this in my class is a couple of ways. And one of the things that's really important about this class and what I love most about it is that it is very, very strong on the practical side of things. So there's a strong practical component. And so in our field, we get to study in lectures all about the science, right? And the physiology of how the body operates and all that fun stuff that we love. But it doesn't do us good if we're not able to take that and apply that information to a real life setting. And so I want my students to be able to walk into their careers or even in their internships and say, I have the ability to do these types of assessments. I know what they mean. I can go ahead and do that. And hopefully that sets them apart from other people. So in class, they're going to spend a lot of time working in labs, and they're going to do peer-to-peer teaching labs. And so in my field, a lot of times when you're in a class and you go through a laboratory experience, it is just that. It's a one-time experience. So you get exposure to it, but you're not a master at it by any means. I want them to be masters at their skills. And so there is no better way to be a master than being able to teach it. So they get to understand what they're doing, but then they have to take it to the next level and they have to teach each other how to actually go through this skill. And when all is said and done, what we do is a midterm practical exam. So instead of doing a written exam and writing out concepts, they come into the lab for a certain period of time. I'm the evaluator, and then I have another one of their peers serving as their patient, and they have to go through a simulation sort of experience. And so I have to watch them interact with their patient, right? Are they doing the procedures correctly? Are they communicating effectively? Are they making sense of the results? And then they're also teaching me how they're doing it to ensure that they're mastering the information. So what did the funding purchase for us? There's two components in fitness that we are going to look at, and there's a lot, but the ones that are pertaining to this funding include body composition and balance. And I bought a device called a bioelectrical impedance analysis, and it's so simple. It's amazing. And actually, you can get one for your home if you would ever choose to do so, but it looks like a standard bathroom scale. And it does that. It's going to give you your weight, but it's also going to give you a little bit more information about your body composition. And essentially what that is how much of your body is made up of fat versus fat-free mass, okay? And so obviously I want to know somebody's body fat. It could be that it's too high and they're at increased risk for certain types of diseases like heart disease or cancer. And then can I take that result and design a physical activity program to help lower that number? So that's going to be important. I might have a recreational or competitive athlete that I need to monitor and make sure body composition doesn't get too low, or they're in an area that would help aid performance. I also want to monitor muscle mass. And this is especially true when we are working with our older population. That is the fastest growing segment in our country. So there's going to be a lot more older adults than there are kids by the year 2030, believe that or not. And I want to be able to measure how much of their weight is muscle mass. And if it starts to go down, are they increased risk for diseases that are going to limit their ability to carry activities of daily living, getting in and out of a car, climbing up and down steps, putting groceries away, picking up a grandchild. And then also it can screen for low bone density. So we all have a certain amount of strength to our bones, and women in particular, as we go through menopause, we're at risk for bone density decreasing to the point that we can see diseases known as osteoporosis. And that's when your bones are weak and you're at increased risk for fracture. So can I screen for that? And if you are screened for low bone density, then, that doctor can take it to the next level and get diagnostic testing, but also prescribe certain types of exercise that's going to actually help you build that. The next part we looked at was balance. And so I purchased what is called a Y balance kit. And that's kind of a funky picture. But essentially what we're trying to do is see how somebody can maintain a certain position, right? And there's two different types of balance. We've got static balance. So if I just asked you all to stand up and stand on one leg with your eyes open or even your eyes closed, you're staying in a position, but you're holding that position. That's static. But oftentimes the movements that we do are dynamic. And so we want to measure somebody's dynamic balance. So for walking, there is a point in your walking gait where one foot is off the ground and you are standing on one foot, or you're kicking a ball, or you're going up steps. So let's make sure that we're monitoring and measuring your ability to balance. And that's across the lifespan. All of us need to have adequate balance. It's especially true for older individuals who are at increased risk for falls, right? And if they fall and they already have bone issues, they're increased risk for fracture and mortality. So that is what I purchased. This next slide is just showing you what the device is. It's literally a bathroom scale. And essentially what it does is sends an electrical current through your feet, and you can't feel it, so you don't get shocked or anything, but it sends an electrical current through your feet, and we can measure your body tissue by how fast that current goes through. If you have more muscle, that current goes faster versus fat, okay? And then the last one is the Y balance test, like I said. So we've got dynamic balance, so there's movement going on. And then the first picture, it's my left. I hope it should be your left too. Your left. I have a student right there balancing on one foot, but then you can see her other leg is extended out in front of her, and she's trying to move that block as far as she possibly can. And then we do it to each side, and we can test both legs and get a composite score and get an idea of what their dynamic balance is. And then we can design training programs and reassess them again to see if their balance has improved. And my last slide is just to show you that, you know, these guys are showing off. We're typically measuring fairly fit individuals in the applied physiology department. And I have to constantly remind them, this is not your mainstream population. But I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for providing that money to purchase really necessary equipment. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Do we have any questions for Kristie? I guess, can you share like how many students do you usually have in class, or how is this something that you can reutilize every semester?
Absolutely. So yes, so this is a class that is offered every spring. I'm trying to make it a required class rather than elective. And I have about 20 students. I lied, 13 students each semester. And so this will be used for sure every semester because this practical component is not going anywhere. And then we also have an exercises medicine on campus program that we have through our department. And so we're actually having an event coming up in April with goat yoga and massage, but we're going to offer the campus fitness assessments. And so I probably won't do the BIA because it will be outside on the Dallas North lawn, but I will definitely bring the Y balance test, and we can have faculty, staff, and students assess their balance. Hopefully, eventually, too, we can start opening up for students to come in and get their fitness assessed as well.
How many students do you have, Aria, in your classes between the classes that you've used at Google Cardboard?
Total, I think we've used them in 2 Italian courses and a French course. About 30 to 40 students have used it in class so far, and then an additional 10 to 20 through the study abroad event.
Mm-hmm.
And we have them available now for checkout in our lab, so anyone can come in and use those if they want to borrow them for class.
Excellent. Thank you. So I guess we'll go to Holly next, Holly Bowen from Psychology Department, and she has gotten some vision simulation glasses.
Yeah, thanks, Addie. Can I share my screen too?
Absolutely.
Okay. So actually my presentation kind of builds off of what Kristie was talking about. So she mentioned, you know, aging and the need for interventions for aging, and how the population is aging, which is causing some issues as a society with caregiving and healthcare and other things. I'm just going to share my screen. So can you see that? Okay. So I'm going to talk about an aging simulation that I did with my Psychology of Aging class with vision simulation glasses. So just to give you some background, so this is an advanced level course. It is the first time that I've taught it in this format. So I used to teach it as about 15-person seminar, and the course has changed to a 50-person lecture style. So we focus on the biopsychosocial model of adult development and aging. So looking at biology, psychology, socio-emotional influences on aging. We talk about everything from cognitive and affective functioning, neurodegenerative disease, interventions, and optimal aging, which is kind of my favorite topic. And so for this aging simulation that I did, it was really to help the students develop an appreciation for what age-related changes are actually like. And so, you know, you can tell them that, you know, many older adults have vision, hearing, mobility issues that start to occur around middle age, but it's another thing to actually experience what that might feel like and how it affects activities of daily living. So things like reading the newspaper, having social conversations, trying to walk up and down the stairs in your home. And so in this simulation, we're focusing on sensory motor function. And the idea is to kind of increase their knowledge of these physical requirements for accomplishing just basic tasks and maintaining independent living, and also trying to increase, sensitivity to the feelings when your skills are impaired, when your independence is compromised, so when you have to rely on somebody to help you do the things that you used to be able to do independently. So in this activity, they get paired up. And so one person assumes the role as an older adult and the other person assumes the role of the caregiver, and then they switch. So they have both experiences. And as the older adult, they experience age-related vision problems, which I'll show you more detail in a second, hearing deficits, breathing difficulties, joint stiffness, mobility, and pain issues as they try to do some activities of daily living. The caregiver is there to help make sure that the older adult is being safe. They were told not to really intervene unless it seemed like they needed help or the person asked them for help. And so they each serve in each of these roles, and then they swap and repeat the exercise. So they're asked to put on some gear. And so that includes these glasses that I'll show you in a second, which is what I used the grant money for. And these simulate different age-related changes to vision. I'm going to specify those in a second. They were also asked to put in cotton balls into their ears to kind of simulate some auditory deficits, hearing deficits. They were asked to put tape around the joints of their hands, so around their knuckles, to simulate sort of mobility issues with their joints. As you get arthritis and things like that, it becomes more difficult to move your hands. They put 4 to 5 beans in their shoes to kind of simulate some mobility issues, as well as some like pain and joint issues. And then they had to breathe through a straw as they were walking up and down some stairs to simulate some breathing issues that older adults might have, like COPD or asthma or things like that. Then what did they do? So we were in Harold Clark Simmons Hall. And so they were asked to walk across the little pathway over to the library, use the computer to gather some information, try to write it down. They had specific things they had to look up. They had to come back, ask for directions from somebody in the noisy classroom to get instructions to the bathroom, but they had to read a newspaper article on the way to the bathroom, which was about getting hearing aids over the counter. And then they had to walk up and down 1 flight of stairs, and this is where they were told to be very cautious, and they had to rely on their caregiver if necessary. So these are the glasses. This is what they look like. They sort of remind me, if you ever went to a 3D movie years ago, you had glasses that were sort of paper with like a film in them, blue and red. They sort of look like that. And there were different ones that come in the package that simulate different types of vision loss that are very common with age. And so probably the worst one is this one here, which is the peripheral field loss, which simulates what it might be like if you have very advanced glaucoma. And so you can see that basically the whole visual field is blacked out, except for a little tiny white dot that they can kind of see out of. So they were sort of randomly assigned to one of these glasses. They just picked them out of the bucket. A few of the other ones here simulate things like floaters or spotty vision that you might have if you have CMV as a result of a virus. Central field loss, which is often what happens when you have macular degeneration. So that's here. It's a little bit difficult to see the floaters here, but there's sort of white flecks all over the lenses. This one here, you can't see out the center of the glasses. So it's a central field loss. And we also have peripheral field loss, which can happen with glaucoma and sometimes after a stroke. This one is overall blurred vision, which is common when you have cataracts until you get your lenses replaced. And then some color deficiencies and other things, which are also common with cataracts. So those were what the grant was used for, to buy these glasses. They come from a medical supply company, so they are used in, I guess, medical school when they are also doing some simulations there. These are some students from the class. Just they had to take a picture of themselves with all the stuff on, kind of doing the activity. So this is someone in the library looking up some information. This is, someone trying to walk up and down the stairs here over to the library. And then they had to write a reflective essay. So they were given some prompts to kind of think about, what did you notice about what had changed in your performance from normal functioning? What was it like to be the caregiver versus the older adult? Were you kind of surprised by your reaction to some of this? They didn't have to answer all of these prompts, but just some things to kind of get them thinking about the experience. And I pulled a bunch of snippets. It was hard to choose, and I'm sorry, this is kind of small. But these were just some of the reactions that I pulled from some of these reflective essays, that they grew frustrated, when they couldn't do things as quickly as they normally could, like typing on the computer. They found it frustrating when your body doesn't work the way you think it should or the way you want it to. Kind of talking about emotions that they felt, that they kind of felt embarrassed that they couldn't do things, and they felt like they needed to pretend that they were comfortable in a busy environment in the library with lots of people around, including actually some older adults were in the library while they were there, and so they felt kind of embarrassed that they were struggling with their tasks. A couple of people also mentioned appreciation for being the caregiver and trying not to sort of over help in certain situations, trying to have them maintain independence, kind of conflicting with their desire to help them as much as possible. One of the ones that they felt was the worst was chickpeas in the shoes. That was pretty uncomfortable for most of them. A lot of them commented on, this idea that they were very happy to take off all the equipment afterwards, but realizing that as an older adult, that's not going to be possible if you have some of these conditions. Thinking about experiences that they've had with grandparents and not really realizing, how bad the situation was. So someone had the cataract glasses on, their grandparents had cataract surgery, but they didn't realize how bad their vision had been without, having experienced these glasses. And finally, some also came up with some suggestions of what we can do. So so some people wish that the mouse on the computer was bigger because they had a hard time tracking the cursor on the screen, and that we should have sort of an elderly mode on computers to make things bigger and louder than normal. So those are just some of the snippets. And then I also had them do a reflective essay at the very end of the course. And this was sort of towards the beginning of the course. And the one at the end was mostly for them to kind of reflect on what they've learned over the course and, things that they are taking away. And a lot of people, I think that this simulation will kind of stick with them, and hopefully will convince some of them to maybe move into the field of aging. So that was sort of the idea, and it seems like it did create a lasting impression on them. So I will use these again in the future. So thanks to CTE and Academic Technology Services for providing these grants.
Absolutely. So how many students did you have this term, this first time they used this?
I think 50.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Yeah, but it can be used every semester again, right?
Yeah, so I teach this course pretty much every spring.
Okay, excellent.
Going forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Ollie, that is awesome. I love that project. And I might be putting you on the spot, but would you consider renting those out to another faculty member that maybe want to incorporate that into a lab when I talk about aging? And that faculty member is me, but that's awesome. What a great project.
Yeah, definitely. So I still have all the glasses, and some didn't even get open because they come in packs of 10 with like one of each type in the little packs. And so I definitely still have lots. There was one particular type we didn't end up using because I felt like it was a little bit actually kind of dangerous, but yeah, definitely let me know if you want to borrow them.
Thank you. That was awesome.
That's great. And that's the type of innovation and collaboration that we would love to see with this just-in-time grants, right? Like that's why we started kind of thinking about doing these showcases, because the whole point is that you have these innovative teaching techniques that happen in the class because of these tools. And if we can share between departments, that would be great. And if you want to share and then you say, Kristie, like, oh, this is something that I must have in my department for my department to use, and it's conflicting with Holly, being able to use in her class, and then maybe somebody from your department could request it and we could have it there available, right? but at least this can get the spark going, and and you can test it out and see how it goes, and we can have these innovative pedagogical experiences happening in our classrooms. And sometimes, like, if you're trying to get it from your department or from the school, it might take a little longer to get this money, and we're trying to make it super easy for you to get and test it out and see how it goes, and so that things can happen. So Matthew, are you ready to go next?
Yeah. So I'm Matt Boulanger. I'm research assistant professor over in anthropology, and I teach primarily archaeology classes. One of the classes that I teach every semester is Anthropology 2302, which is a survey of world prehistory and human evolution. And this is a big class. We get a lot of students taking it for the curricular requirements, whatever they may be called this time around. They might change again. And so we don't get a lot of anthropology majors or archaeology majors. So this is really an opportunity for us to kind of reach out and convince some kids that they might be interested in this field, and to take some more classes, maybe pick up some minors, maybe pick up some majors. But because of the size of the class, between about 120 students to 150, although this semester they scheduled it at 8 a.m., so I have significantly fewer students coming in at 8 a.m. We have about 45 this semester. But most semesters, it's right over the lunch hour. It's a fairly big class. It's lecture based. It's hard to reach kids, right, students, in a lecture hall, and to show them that they should be excited about archaeology. Most folks are more interested in technologies like their cell phones or computers or whatever. So getting them interested in ancient technologies is kind of difficult. One thing that I frequently do is I bring with me artifacts. So this is a solid stone hand axe. This is about 500,000 years old or so. Comes from modern day Sudan. And one of the former faculty members here used to do archaeological field work there, made a lot of collections. And so we actually have a decent collection of stuff that's this old. But as you can imagine, that's the only one of those things like it in the only one of that in the world, and nobody is around making these anymore. Those people are long gone, as old as it is, and so it's a bit scary to have to pick this up and give it to 150 students, some of whom are very interested and some of them couldn't care less, because if it drops and it breaks, that's it. It's the definition of a priceless artifact, that you just cannot put a price on it. And so me carrying it to class, or having the TAs carry it to class across campus, every time you move it around, you risk that. And so a few years ago, shortly after I got to SMU, I started applying for CTE grants to buy resin and plastic casts of these artifacts. So there's 4 companies in the world or so that will take actual archaeological artifacts found from sites like these, and they will make perfect scale replica casts of them. So we can order casts of artifacts that are in the Louvre, that are in the Vatican, that are in, the Smithsonian, things that we don't have copies of because there's only one, right? And so this year we got one, and I tried something new. I went with a new company in Spain that I've never bought stuff from before, because they have these cool kits that solve a lot of the problems for me, carrying stuff to class, etc., and keeping track of it. And the kits look like a little suitcase. And in that suitcase, I think this is like I nerd out on this stuff. In that suitcase is a foam packed, this would be so much better in person, but a foam packed, and I've labeled everything, collection of casts, including ones that so these are plastic, but this is the plastic part, but they've actually wrapped it in leather. So you can actually see how a Stone Age knife should look when it was being used. The same thing with a tool like this, where you have a wooden handle and then stone blades that are inset into it. And this kit also has things like pigments, like iron oxides or ochre. So there's a painting kit, and I'm kind of excited to use this to have students actually recreate or see how you would recreate and produce things like Upper Paleolithic cave paintings, like what you would find at Lascaux and Altamira and other places in France and Spain. And it just has a whole bunch of cool stuff that students would never see otherwise. And if they happen to, drop and break a plastic looking pot, it can be glued back together and it's nobody's big loss. As opposed to handing them something that's 25,000 years old and having them drop it and break it, at which point I would probably have a heart attack. I might get fired, I don't know, but I would certainly have a heart attack about it. And the great thing about this particular kit is because it spans this particular kit, the artifacts represented span about 20,000 years or so. Stuff that I purchased a few years ago with the CTE grant goes back to about 400,000 years ago. But they can be used for not just the class that I teach, but for other more specialized archaeology classes. For example, in this case, the archaeology of the Upper Paleolithic in Europe, or the transition from the Paleolithic to the Mesolithic. Because there's such a variety of different things, there's a number, I'm not going to pull it out, but there's a number of things that are interactive. So for example, a drop spindle for spinning wool, a hand pump drill, so you can actually see how a drill works before, not a power drill, but a handmade primitive drill. That when you try to explain it to students or you show them a video on the screen in a lecture, they don't care. But when you pull out a stick with a rock on it and you can drill a hole in 10 seconds, that's like, then that engages their interest in engineering and technology. And that's what got me into archaeology. And I see it when I teach classes where, and I show them this. If I just describe it, it doesn't do anything, but allowing them to use it, to see it, to figure out how it works, that's when they start to kind of, catch on and genuinely perk up. Yeah. Plus it's cool because there's so much stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions for him? Or just any questions in general for any of the award winners?
I would just like to say thank you to everyone for participating today. I really appreciate it. This has been great. Go ahead, Maria. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, I want to thank you all because it's so stimulating to hear all those projects and the ideas. And I want to ask everybody, what was the outcome, or what makes you like say, wow, this was really worth it? Like, do you want to share any experience of something a student said, or something that changed the way you were teaching that, or anything that you want to share about the time that you use that tool for the first time. And I'm just curious about that, about the reaction of the students, or anything that you want to share with us regarding to that.
I'll share. I think it's easy when you have technology or equipment that you bring in, right? It's just easier to get engaged with. So it makes the class go by faster. I actually feel like they learn better, right? Rather than just one-sided conversations. But I think the biggest thing for me is when you hear from a student after they go through it's stressful to do a midterm practical. They're not used to something like that. So it's great to hear when they come back and they say, that was really stressful. Wasn't really sure how that was going to go, but I'm so glad that I had that experience. And the only way that I have that experience for them is if I can get the equipment. Otherwise, there is no such thing as what I'm doing. So it's worth it.
Thank you.
I would add that, you know, for the relatively like little amount of money that you know, these grants provide, they really do provide priceless opportunities, as Matthew mentioned. And the, you know, the anecdotes that I would share when we did the cooking class virtually, which I know is not part of this particular, you know, year's grants, but when we were in Italy in summer 2022, I had 3 students with me in Tuscany that had taken that class during COVID. And when we were actually making pasta, they were like, it was actually just as fun almost doing it in Zoom with that guy, right? Like, and we were laughing about how at the time that felt like such a strange thing to be doing, but that it was really a wonderful bonding experience. And I really would venture to say that it was part of the reason why they continued on with Italian and ended up being able to go to Italy. So those kinds of hands-on experiences are super valuable. With the cardboards, we were actually able to get a student to come abroad with us because she was not an Italian minor. She was a Lyle student, very interested in gaming, had finished her language requirement, was graduating in the spring, and was like, this is so cool. I wish we could do more with this. And I wish I could have a part in it. And I thought, well, why don't we make that happen? And so she was able to actually come abroad with us to do an independent study project, and captured a lot of footage for us. And Deadman ATS was able to get us an Oculus. So we hope to eventually be able to use some of the footage that she captured to create VR experiences that would be curated by our students. So it's just like, really, it is like one thing leads to another, and a small grant like this can really lead to a lot of future projects and great, you know, sources of collaboration for our students.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So I would like to plug in that we will have on the next month another session, and we're going to be showcasing 4 more projects that were funded by this grant. So for the next 4, we're going to have Dr. Jill DeTempo from Religious Studies featuring 2-minute movies with text-to-speech software. And then we have Andrea Laurent Simpson from the Sociology Department, which has some board games. Janice Lindstrom from Music Therapy, and she has a assistive communication technology. And Jerliza Devison in the art department, and she has some screen printing and other art processes. So she got some supplies to try new art processes in her art classes. So if you are able to join us, that will be great, or just share with other folks. We're going to try to do that one in person and see if people go and sign up in person. But we'll try to do hybrid too. If not, we'll do it online again. But we really appreciate your time, and thank you for giving us feedback on how you've used these devices or these technologies that you have acquired. And yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Addie.
Thank you.
Addie.